Mic check. Hello and welcome to Edukemy's YouTube channel. My name is Harsh Singh, and in this video we shall discuss the featured news for today, that is 1st of November 2021. Today's featured news is on a very important report which has been published by United Nations Environment Programme UNEP. The name of the report is called as Emission Gap Report 2021. Right? So this report becomes a very important yardstick for understanding what is the current level of emissions around the world and what is the gap, what emissions are required, what has been declared, and what is the present level of emissions around the world, right? So this is the one which shows the mirror to all the countries, right? What have they declared, what are they achieving, and what is required. So this is emissions gap report. Just a few days back we had also discussed the production gap report in one of the feature articles, right? So production, all the countries had also said that they will be producing less of conventional energy, but they did not do that. The production was more than what they had asked for. In fact, what was required was to drastically cut down the conventional production, but it did not happen. So that report, production gap report, also showed a light. Now emission gap, which is also very synonymous to production gap, it also shows light, right? So both of them released by United Nations United Nations Environment Programme. Do remember that, right? So a report like this also gives the policy framers a direction, a roadmap, not only for international discussions, but also for the countries. And hello Anonymous, hello to Jayashree, welcome both of you, right? See, I have discussed this innumerable times that this particular article, the featured news, is the one on which you can write an answer, and this is the one which will help you in the main exam directly. All the other articles, they will provide important fodder. Maybe that the whole article itself is about the answer, but this one holistically will cover one or the other aspects of writing answers, which is chiefly important. So therefore this article also becomes very, very important for you. And this report, emission gap report, is a 120-30 page report. You can study that, or you can also glance through this, pick up the important pointers immediately, and your emission gap report for 2021 is covered, right? Even in case a question like this is not asked, right? Even in case it is not asked, you can always put in these kind of facts and data. Always, in every related answer, there will be questions on climate change. There has to be. This is the agenda of the day. In fact, bureaucrats and the civil servants around the day are involved in processes which are mitigating climate change. So these questions are inevitable, and that is why I would like to discuss quickly what is happening around the world. See, what was required was to have 2-degree maximum rise in temperature towards the end of 2100. Right? So around 80 years from now, but maximum 2 degree and preferably 1.5 degree. But we have already come to a place where we have increased 1 degree Celsius temperature from the pre-industrial levels. And the IPCC AR6, the assessment report 6, AR6 report, the first part of it, which was published just this year, and we covered assessment report 6. It has already mentioned that if we go beyond 1.52 degrees Celsius, this is going to reveal utter destruction for the whole of Earth, right? The kind of destruction that we are talking of is unimaginable, and that is why United Nations has also termed this time as code red for humanity. Code these kind of things, code red for humanity. So what is the current level? Current level is already 1 degree above, and the way we are proceeding, the way we are pledging for climate goals, it seems that we will be able to achieve maximum 2.7 degree Celsius, either this or even more at the end of this century. So if the average temperature was just giving an example, was 30 degree of the whole Earth, right? This is a very layman example. So average temperature will be 32.7 degree towards the end of this century, and it will result in utter havoc, environmental havoc on the Earth, right? So what are we trying to avoid? This kind of temperature rise. But for that, what is required? What is required is for countries to declare some or the other agenda for mitigating climate change. Are countries doing that? Let's discuss that. This is what this this discussion is about. This is also about emission gap report. All right. So let us quickly take you to the place where this report is presented. All right, so this is the cover page. It says the heat is on. A world of climate promises not yet delivered. Climate promises not yet delivered. See, and you see a thermometer, and black, what it indicates is the fossil fuels burning, right? So what is required is that with time the emissions which are increasing, they decrease, otherwise it results in increasing of temperature, right? And this is the gap. See, we have to reduce this temperature so that temperature rise, the emission rise, so that there is less of rise of climate extremities. But this is not happening. So this is the gap. You can present a very simplistic map, image through this kind of image, right? So this is one. See, this is what was the image I wanted to show you a few days back. This is about the production gap. See, when you see this image very clearly, you will be able to understand the production gap, and you also will be able to relate the emission gap. See, when we talk of the color yellow, this is the production that was pledged. This is the amount of fossil fuels that will be produced. Please do not confuse. This is the production gap report image, right? One of the images. But this will directly tell you about the gap in emission also. If we produce more, we are emitting more, right? These are fossil fuel emissions. So this is what was pledged. Itna produce karenge, we will produce this much. But they actually ended up producing more than that was required. See, more than that was required. They pledged this much, they produced more than that. And when you want to reduce the temperature of the whole earth by 2 degrees, right, you got to produce this much. But if you want to reduce, have the limitations, limit the earth's temperature rising by 1.5 degree, you have to further curtail the production of conventional energy by this much. So the effective gap is very, very huge. See, red to the blue, purple, this is the gap, red to purple. So this is the production gap, right? Similar is the emission gap. Very similar is the emission gap. So what was declared was around this, right? Yellow is the pledge. Current policy is leading to even more than what is pledged. Even more. We have to decrease, it is leading to more. But if we want the curtailment of temperature by 2 degrees Celsius, we have to ensure that the emissions further get reduced. For 1.5, see the kind of reduction we are talking of, right? And 2030, this is the year that they are saying you should have peak emissions, right? After that, you should start curtailing your emissions, right? So this is what becomes very important, and we are at this place. The emissions might increase in the coming times, but eventually they should decrease. So this is the first demand from countries. Tell us, by when will you become climate neutral? By when will you be able to achieve net zero? So countries have declared this. Some countries have already declared. America has declared, Australia and United States of America, European Union, UK, all have declared them as 2050. There are countries like China, there are countries like Saudi Arabia, they have declared it as 2060 by the time when they will become climate neutral, and it will take them 20 to 30 years for them to become climate neutral. That means that this is the time around 2030-35 they will peak their carbon emissions, carbon or other global warming emissions, they will peak here. So India has yet not declared. Why? Because India is a little fearful, right? India is a little fearful that India is still getting industrialized. India is still trying to utilize these global warming and conventional fuels. But if it limits its production or emission, then what will happen to providing employment? Right now, we do not have those non-conventional renewable sources of efficient process of employment. So this is what is India's fear. Countries have not declared many of the mechanisms. Even if they have declared it, the smaller fragments of it, for example, what will be the curtailment in petroleum industry? How will they be able to manage the renewable energy under the head of sun and wind? They have not declared this at all, right? So the mechanism and has not been declared completely. Also, what is the level of accountability? This has not been fixed at all right now. So when we are talking of it, I just discussed with you people the complete report of the communique of the G20 leaders, right? It right away mentioned that they will be curtailing and they will be ensuring 1.5 degrees Celsius rise in temperature at max. But are they doing it? No. It also mentioned that $100 billion fund will be given. Are they giving that? No, they are not doing that right now. So these are the kind of proof you simply get to understand. Right now we will work towards making a very good answer and understanding of the article. So this image also becomes very, very relevant. See, when countries are declaring their pledges, there are three ways in which they will be able to cover it, right? So this is the year 2022, see this point, and 2030, around this time emission should peak, ideally should peak, and after that it should come down, right? So there are three main ways in which it should come down. One is a delayed path, the other one is a linear path, and the third one is accelerated path. See, one is a linear path, that means after 2030 cut down of energy emission in a proportional manner. The third one, the second one is accelerated path. So this one talks of an accelerated path. You cut down so much in the beginning that it is easier for you to transit. And the delayed path is this one, right? The one where you are delaying the whole production. So towards the end you will see a sudden drop in the energy intensity around 2050-60. So India most probably will be following the third one, right? So this becomes important. This image also becomes important because you can present this in your answers straight away, right? Very, very good image. And these three paths, delayed, linear and accelerated path, these technical words become important for you. Okay, so let me get back to the feature article immediately and explain to you the rest of it. Okay, any questions, just get back to me. All right, so what has been found that the temperature rise will be around 2.7 degrees Celsius, but what is required is to have it curtail at 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius. This is not coming under the ambit of countries because many of them have not declared the targets. Even if they have declared, they are not certain about the smaller breakdown of it, right? Now this is happening despite COVID times. Despite COVID times, when energy intensity and energy reduction, energy usage was dropped. It dropped 5% in 2020. Even then the impact is not visible. You know why? The impact is not visible because the half-life of CO2 is high. It is more than 100 years. It can stay in the atmosphere for long. So whatever we have produced in 2019, 2018, it has still got its impact. It is not going to change that, right? So 1 or 2 year of these kind of reduction is not going to affect it. And also it was not purposeful, no? It happened just because of COVID lockdown. So this is the first remark of it. The second one it says is new mitigation pledges for 2030. There has been an increased pressure by global leaders on India to declare its pledges. Ab India bol hi nahi raha hai. India is not declaring it very simply because India says that it is not to its strategy, right? So this is one. Some countries have shown inclination for increasing the pledges. India says we will abide by the previous pledges only, Paris climate privileges. Right, so the most important pledge for India was that India will have energy intensity, right? What is that? Emission intensity reduction of 33 to 35% of 2005 levels by the year 2030. So, do you think this is the curtailment of the fossil fuel? Is this the emission reduction? Can anybody say it? Is this the emission reduction or according to 2005 levels? Anybody? Or is it the emission intensity? What is emission intensity? This is my question, right? Can anybody say what is it? Is it the effective reduction in emissions of the country? This is my question. To 33-35% levels? The answer is no, it is not. Emission intensity reduction means that the amount of emission that will be done per unit GDP will get reduced. Per unit GDP will get reduced. If the GDP grows, the emission will grow for that country. So India's emission is growing with time, but per unit GDP, the emission will be less. Per unit emission will be less as compared, when we look at the GDP of the country. So this becomes important for you to understand. India has achieved already around 24% of it. India is well set to achieve this, right? So this target India is well set to achieve, but the demand from the countries all over is to increase these kind of pledges. So some countries have pledged even more, but it is unaccounted for right now. They have only pledged something. It is not going to do anything unless until we have carbon credit, carbon purchase mechanisms. Okay, so G20 members have also pledged. See, just a while back we studied that G20 contributes to 80% of the emissions, 80%. But they have pledged, and this is like Dindora Pitna. This is like empty promises. but this is the present status of the world, right? So by the time we die around 70-80 years from now, we might not be able to see the kind of destruction that happens at 12 to 2100, but we might be able to see the kind of transformation the climate is going through. We are already seeing that, right? Increased number of cyclones, increased flood, increased natural disasters happening. Okay, so we see around 10 countries in G20, they have declared renewed targets, and which is a very good thing, but these are not accountable right now, right? So net zero targets have been declared. This is what it says here. The emission gap remains, right? So right now the emission gap report says that compared to the previous unconditional NDCs, nationally determined contributions, they are not going to be enough. What are we going to see is a rise of around 2.7 degrees Celsius. What we need right now is to have a 55% reduction. 55% reduction in the emission reduction is required to be able to have 1.5 degrees Celsius rise. Leave apart reduction, we are on the path of increasing it, right? So by 2030, the demand is to reduce the total amount of conventional energy. Do remember that. By 2030, the demand is to peak countries' energy consumption, conventional energy, but it is not happening. Right? Demand is to reduce it to around 50%, so that by 2030, so that we are able to achieve maximum 1.5 degree Celsius rise. If we want to have 2 degrees Celsius rise, we have to reduce it by 33%. These are the two stats you can remember, right? But we are not on the path of either of them. Okay. Okay, so see, there are so many data and statistics and facts. You don't have to remember all of them. Just pick up 3 important ones, 3 impactful ones, and you will be able to represent that, and that is powerful enough. I will be, although explaining to you n number of facts and data so that you are able to understand it, right? But you will not be using so many of them in your examination, right? It might even confuse the examiner. But while you study this, while you go through this article, any questions, you please come ahead and ask me, right? Similarly, we have methane. So there is an agenda for reducing the methane expenditure consumption as well. So methane is one of the gases which has less presence in the atmosphere. Its half-life is just around 10 years, but the kind of impact it has in the atmosphere, that means global warming, is 25 times, around 25 times the global warming that carbon dioxide causes. So there is another mechanism for enabling methane reduction. Right? So if you remember 30 by 30 pledge of the advanced countries, European Union and USA, good example. See, we have studied that in one of the snapshots. Just relate that to this. Write this also in climate, and write that also in climate environment section of your notes, and you will be able to relate them quickly. So this is what is required, right? 30 by 30 methane pledge, and methane reduction is also important. See, it has been mentioned here as well. They are all linked, right? Now, what do we need? If countries have declared these kind of pledges, what is required is to have carbon markets, carbon credits and carbon markets, where these kind of carbon credit purchases and sales can be done, right? So this is what is required. This mechanism was not working in the Paris Climate Agreement, but now there is an intended reason for the countries to be a participant here, right? Okay. So what are the principles of green recovery? Upholding commitments. This becomes very important because countries are declaring but they are not upholding their commitments, right? We also say padhenge, nahi padhte hain, hai na? Building resilience. See, building resilience becomes very important because although we are telling them to reduce, but the kind of impact it has already caused in the atmosphere, it is here to stay for 20-30 years, right? And that is why we say 2030 tak net 2030 tak emission peak, and after that it takes 30 years, 20 to 30 years for net zero. This is the time in which we will see the impact of जो भी हमने अभी तक किया है. This is the time. So we have to build resilience for this time, right? This becomes important again. And then prioritizing transparency. See, many of the institutions declare net zero targets, but even if they say they achieve it, what about the flawed data collection, right? So this transparency is also important, right? Accelerating the transition, creating alliances between countries, and supporting the private sector. These are the important keywords you can use while you are giving solution of transiting and going towards a green recovery. Okay. So we have covered one feature on net zero completely, and then we have also covered what are the issues around net zero and 1.5 degree limitations, right? All right. So after having understood various perspectives of this article, right? This article was on emission gap report. Emission gap report. We also understood production gap report. What did we understand here? We understood the present level of emissions and what is required and what the world over is doing. This is one thing that we understood. Do remember both the graphs, though they are very, very important. You put that graph in your answer and a couple of marks extra will be added to your score, right? And these 2 marks are valuable 2 marks in your 250 marks for paper 3. So emission gap report, along with that we also studied the G20 countries from the snapshot, right? Pick it up from there. We also understood what is the present level of curtailment and what is required. 1.5 degree, what is required? 2.7 degree, what is happening right now? What are the issues with countries like India? So India always speaks of emission intensity reduction. India does not speak of emission reduction right now. Emission intensity. See, that is the difference. We are not talking of the net reduction of the emissions. We are talking of reducing the emission per unit GDP. GDP will rise, emission will also rise. But we are talking of lesser emission as the GDP rises. So that is the question. When are you going to effectively curtail the total emissions only? That is the question. India is silent on that. So one criticism there. Another criticism here is of those countries which have declared these targets, right? What is the accountability mechanism? How have you detailed the several parts? Which ministry? How is transport ministry going to decrease it? Or is it tourism ministry? So you have to make the smaller fragments also accountable, right? So these are the various perspectives we have discussed right now, along with some data and stats, right? So this will circularly form a complete answer of a question, right? So suppose the question is, discuss major gaps in emission status of the world. What can be done to mend the gaps, right? See, here is the question, and just before the question was the answer. तो सवाल से पूछने से पहले ही आंसर आपको दिख गया था, right? Discuss the major gap in emission status of the world, right? So your answer starts with talking about an introduction of need for this, need for the emission status, need for understanding the emission status, because emission is directly related to climate change, climate disasters, right? So you talk about code red for humanity here in the introduction, and then just after that you will give an image which will form an important impactful part for the answer. Examiner will want to read that answer further. Okay? So immediately after the introduction, give an image, relevant image here, and after that discuss the major gaps. You will talk about the major gaps with examples. When you talk of countries not declaring, talk of India. When you talk of countries declaring but not declaring various subparts, talk of USA, talk of European Union, right? All the countries are doing it. When you talk of another major gap, talk of lobbying. We have spoken about how countries are lobbying about it, right? About how to not include meat industry, Argentina and Brazil. About how not to include the 100 billion fund, Australia and UK. About how not to include the carbon mechanisms, right? So this is Australia and Saudi Arabia again, right? So because Australia has good amount of coal, Saudi Arabia has got good amount of petroleum reserves, the lobby is such. So 4 or 5 points here. Then also represent these stats. If this does not happen, what is it going to result into, and what can be done to mend the gaps? See, what can be done to mend the gaps? Here is the part. Here is the part. See, all 6 of them, right? All 6, 7. Don't write 6, 7 of them, but write at least 5 of them, and you don't have to even write them. Put them in the form of an image, right? It will save your time. It will also save the number of words you're writing, and you will be able to catch the attention of the examiner. This is how, and after that is quick conclusion. So this is how your answer gets completed. See, I creating the answer for you will not work. Slowly and steadily you have to enable yourself to start writing this. But first of all, you have to start understanding the process. So try attempting this answer on your own, and you will see how your mind opens yourself, right? So attempt this question. This becomes important if you are preparing for the main examination for any state government exam or UPSC exam. All the exams are subjective exams. So that is why we stress on this kind of article, right? Feature article. Right now, all I would want you to do is meet us tomorrow evening again, right? So that we discuss the featured news at 6:45 p.m. and gazette discussion at 6 p.m. live. All right. Till then, any questions, doubts, just put it across and we will be able to support. All right. Thank you for watching.